how to use the icicle in the project. And so, I mean, the main idea of this workshop is Unity's concepts on triggers, parenting and colliders, as well as a scene manager, which we will be using in the script. Which, by the way, did everyone here in the workshop find the .cs script I put on Discord?
No.
So yeah, just download that and just save it somewhere. Yeah, I just like mentioned it here as well. Just make sure to save that anywhere in your folder that you feel like you can find it, because we'll be using that later on. And basically, we'll just be using the icicle inside the Unity project, and it's just going to fall down on the player and restart the level. That's the idea. So everyone, any questions before we begin? Cool.
Are we gonna create the actual like reviving system?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like restarting the level.
okay.
Very simple.
Okay.
So we'll set up because we don't have a scene. So we're gonna make one inside the IQ tutorial. So you just right click it, create a scene, and name it whatever you want. So for example, this is the ITU directory right here. And right here, I'm gonna right click, create, oh, not prefab, my bad. We'll leave that there. But I wanna create a scene. And I'll name it icicle. Cool. And I'll open that up, and it should just be an empty scene with a camera. All right, and now, so after that's all set up, we can move on to making a level. Now this will just be a quick refresh on anyone who used tile maps. I taught that earlier, but if you didn't go to that one, that's okay. We'll quickly relearn it right now. So what we'll do is go back to Unity. We right click inside the scene. We go to 2D object and we make a tile map. Oh, whoa. See, where is the camera here?
Go to scene, getting animator. Oh, I don't know.
But anyways, I'm just trying to find the way we're going to be placing stuff. But yeah, so here's the tile map. And, oh, just before we start, because I already know this is going to happen, we need to change the cell size or cell gap size, where we need to set that to 0.6 and the Y to 0.4-ish. And that's just because we messed up these tiles. But yeah, but this will make it so the tiles come out nice. And then after that, we go to Window, 2D, and Tile Palette. And we have some nice default ones. And we'll be using these just to set up like a box level. So I'll just use the square tool. You're free to use the brush or the square. And just, what the heck?
To the left. Scene.
Oh, that's why I wasn't able to see. There we go. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm just gonna just paint it on here. Any questions, by the way, about how to use tile maps real quick? Or we all good on that? So something like this is perfectly fine for what we're going to do next. And yeah, so that's the first part done. Now I'm just going to close this when we're done.
Where did you go to get the brush tool again?
Oh, so yeah, inside the tile palette, there is these tools up here. The brush is where you can just like put one at a time or just like drag it out. And the square tool, it just like creates a block.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're just, these are the two more popular ones. You can always use the erase one. I'm not sure what the other ones do. I haven't used those, but these are the two I use the most. And yeah. So we're all good? Cool. Let's close this real quick and go back here. So we made a simple box for our level. Now, let's just insert a player in. So let's go back to Unity real quick and insert the player beginner prefab. which should be in ITU tutorials, the prefab folder in the beginner player, and just toss them right here. Should have everything set up. Oh, one more thing. We should probably tag grid as ground in the layer, right? So that way the player can actually stay there. And also, we need to add, oops. Whoa. There we go. And also we need to add a tile map collider 2D just to make sure our level is solid.
Do you mind if I add something to
Yeah.
this? How many of you are in a scaffold project? This might be interesting. So as you can see right now, right, you have you done something like this?
No.
So are you working in the platform or in the top down?
Platform.
Okay. So in the platform, right, it's a good way to make colliders, right? We know that colliders is so they can touch the ground, right?
Yeah.
The problem with this, however, is that as you can see, there's like how many colliders, right?
Yeah.
So that's very expensive unity-wise, right? So it's not as optimal as you wish. You can also have some sort of like weird behavior with the colliders being like side by side, right?
Yeah.
So a good way to optimize this and create everything just to be one collider is very easy. If you can see here in the tile map collider 2D, there's a use by composite. So you can check that. Then it's gonna tell us that we need a composite. So we do a component composite collider 2D. When
Yeah.
you add it, it will automatically add rigid body 2D physics to it.
Cool.
So now if we,
Should be kinematic.
yeah, to make it even more optimal, right, you will put static because it's not moving. So that will make it even cheaper.
Yeah.
And as you can see the level now, it doesn't have all the colliders. It only has one that
Yeah.
takes the exact shape of our object. So we went from having like 100 to 200 colliders to having just one and having the same ability. Really good to do.
Yeah.
You're free to use whatever you want to use. If you're just trying to pump out a level real quick, the prototype, tile map colliders are fine. But once you start nearing the end of your game, this is also a good way of just optimizing the size of your engine, or the size of your game, I guess you could say. And so yeah, ground we should have ground tagged. We have the player now, we have the colliders. If I test this right now, should be okay, right? Yes, cool. So that's part one. Just getting the player moving inside our box. Anyone have any questions? No? All right. Now, on to the workshop part. So, we've set up everything we need before we start creating this object that I will call the icicle. So, inside the scene hierarchy, we need to create an empty object just to be the manager of our icicle. And then after that, we need to create two children inside of it. One that'll be checking the trigger zone, and one that'll be dropping the icicle itself. That's just the design of how we'll make this icicle. And we'll be using triggers as well. And I'll move on to Unity just to show you how this will look like. So first, we will have to go inside scene hierarchy and create an empty object. Whoop, not there. And I'll call this the ice manager. You can name it whatever you want. The name doesn't really matter. And this, if you want to see where it is to make it easier to like place it, you can color it as well. So like right here, I can now see that the object is right here now. And I could just like move it near the top since we're going to be putting that there later on. And then you highlight this object and right click it to create another empty. We'll name this like the trigger zone. Yeah. And I'll color this too just to make it easier to see as well. And I can like do that. And now inside this trigger zone we need to create like a place to make sure it knows that the player's inside of it. So what we'll be doing is we'll be adding a component, a box collider. And now it's just this tiny box, but we're gonna adjust it so that it covers this entire column. Whoop. shouldn't forget to also check is trigger.
Question. Does anybody know the difference between trigger and non-trigger colliders?
However as you choose to pronounce this.
Pretty sure non-trigger colliders, you like run into them and nothing really happens, but trigger colliders, you go into them and like you can go through them, but they activate some sort of script or something.
So
when you say something doesn't happen, what do you mean?
I mean, it's like a wall.
Okay.
Yeah, or you push it over or something.
So yeah, so like an instance. So we have an actual collider inside the level, but the one you see on the right is actually a trigger. So here, I can't go beyond this. However, I'm able to walk through this one. And that's because we set it as a trigger. So now, we'll have some code from our programmers that'll check to see if the player's in that zone, rather than actually like blocking a player.
If anyone is interested about those functions, if you're a programmer, Unity comes with a lot of methods implemented in it, and this one is onTrigger enter 2D. So as soon as you write onTrigger enter 2D, we know that we're referring to the moment of that happening when someone's touching. We can access all these things because we are using mono behavior. So there's onTrigger.
Is this script in the player or in the...
Trigger fall should be inside the enemies folder of the scripts.
onTrigger enter is on the agent that has the collider, that has the trigger.
Oh, you're talking about the method.
Yeah, like this script is inside the object that has the trigger collider. Because as you can see, one of the parameters says collider to be collision. That refers to whatever touch you collider.
Yeah, and we'll be using this script soon. I'm just showing it to you just to make it clear that's why we make it a trigger rather than a collider.
Sorry if I interrupt you, by the way.
No problem. Just jump in anytime you want. But yeah, so now, the slides. So we've done everything here. Next, we'll be adding the icicle. So we'll need to make the icicle asset inside the Unity project. So we need this little icicle thing up here, and we need to attach it to the top part of the manager, so that way it like drops down once the player hits that zone. And so if we go to Unity, I will find the asset. So it should be in ITU tutorials, sprites. Not sprites. Oh, hang on. It should be in this sprites folder right here. So inside assets and then sprites, there's this thing called isicles. Just drag that inside the trigger zone, and well, it's super tiny, unfortunately, and it's also over there. First, we're gonna drag it. See it from here. There we go.
over here? I have no idea.
Drag that into the manager area, and because it's so tiny, we're gonna have to scale it. I'm sorry, any artists who are listening, but don't do that actually. But we're gonna have to scale it, unfortunately. But yeah, don't do this with actual art assets, please. Resizing actually just makes it look weird in comparison to your game.
You want me to show a good way to resize it?
Oh, okay then, yeah.
No, it's down to like 40%.
Do you guys know why it's a bad way to resize it?
That 40% would be really good, like hours and minutes.
Stretch it.
And
It stretches. If you're doing pixel art, this will kill your pixel art because you're stretching it so the pixel size is different now.
Yeah.
Another reason is because it can actually make Unity have some sort of weird behavior. Like it can even like some things will just like not act as they're supposed to in detail. Like it's just Unity is a black box, right? We know how it works inside. But this opens opportunity for some weird behavior to happen. So a safe way to change this would be that while you're in your icicles object, right? This is not one in the scene. This is the actual object that we have, right? The one original copy. In here you have pixels per unit. So pixels per unit is like unit as Unity units, right? So in real life we have centimeter, inches, feet. There's Unity units, right? Even though that was weird. So that's how many pixels it covers per unit. So what we can do is that we can lower the pixels per unit, right? And now when we hit apply, it will actually get bigger by keeping the same amount of scaling. Now sometimes that might make it look more blurry. How to fix that is that you will go into filter mode. Oh, it's already there. And you will do point no filter. Originally, by default, it's by linear. So you know how blurry it looks? So if you put it by point, no filter, that will actually fix it.
And would I change it back to 1 and 1?
Yeah, that gives the same ratio and it's a safer way to scale it. You hit apply, yeah.
But if we're acting on their computer, at least
So I'm just doing hardcore scaling in there. Like see, so now if you do that, right, I can even go back to the icicle because it's still pretty tiny. We can just go, and this will change everything, every single prefab of this object. So every instance, right? So you can change it to 25. Apply. It's even bigger. Is that a good size?
Yeah, that's good enough.
Right. That's a good way to change the size of a sprite.
Good to know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But, so yeah. So ignore everything I said about that scaling because now we can change pixels. But we'll be using this icicle now, and we'll need to apply
That's why isolating was invented.
a couple things to it. First, we need to add a polygon collider.
I think you're in play mode.
Oh,
It's gonna save.
oh, it's not gonna save everything then, huh? Oh well, it's fine. It saved that at least.
It saved that, yeah.
Just put this here.
Yeah.
Alright, so
Prefab saves even if you're in play mode.
Yeah.
It's hard coded.
Because it's not, you're not altering it in the scene hierarchy.
Exactly.
Really annoying to draw.
yeah. Alright, so back to what I was saying. Let's add a polygon collider to it, and it should just perfectly fit it. So you don't have to do too much with it. And we also need to add a rigid body to it because that's how we're gonna apply gravity to it eventually. So rigid body 2D. And we want to set it to kinematic at first because kinematic means that it won't apply like gravity to it. What our script will do in the future is change this body type to dynamic, and then dynamic is what will make it fall through. Yeah. And so now we basically have just the basic structure of the object right here. Any questions so far?
So, so
Yeah, go for
could you, instead of changing from kinematic to dynamic, could you just change the effect of gravity on it?
You want to tell us that?
Usually
Yeah, go for it.
So, you know how programming, right? There's not really a right answer for things.
Yeah.
But there's definitely wrong answers for things.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's actually, I can think of 4 different ways to do this right now, right?
Yeah.
You can change static to dynamic.
Mhm.
We did that for sake of simplicity.
Yeah.
But usually when you move any object, you either do it by velocity or by translating it, right?
Yeah.
And then there's this option, right? If you do, or you can do also add force, right?
Yeah.
Those are your 3 ways to move any object in a Unity scene, right? If you add force, the thing that it does is that it adds force at once. So the game is running what, right? 60 frames per second. In a specific frame, you say add force, it adds that force instantly, right? Like I'm pushing the chair.
Yeah.
If I add velocity, however, it changes the velocity forever. So if I change the velocity, I can have that velocity set for 10 frames, or 1 second, or 1 minute, and then change it back to its regular. And add force usually is something that has to do with physics, right?
Yeah.
When you work with physics, you want to do that fix update, right?
Okay.
I think that's something we touched before.
I haven't been to any of these, but
There was a programming workshop on it.
Okay. So I don't want to touch parallel topics, but
Just
basically,
recap it.
okay. So basically, there's fix update and there's update, right?
Yeah.
Update happens once every frame, right? Fix update is different. It doesn't happen once every frame. It happens multiple times in one frame, but not in every frame. We use fix update when we're dealing with physics, right?
Yeah.
So when you're adding force, it just doesn't run in one
frame.
frame or update, right? It runs in fixed update because
Yeah.
it runs multiple times. So it makes sure to calculate your surroundings and it does a calculation for the physics and then it applies it at once. So it's not dependent on frame. When you're not dependent on time and you just want to add it, you do add force. When you're dependent on time and you want the exact amount of time that this is gonna be there,
Yeah.
do velocity.
Yeah.
If you don't care about collisions, do translate. Because translate will also do the same thing, but it will ignore any collisions. Those are the differences. Sorry if that's unclear.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
You good? So this is just for, because it's the simplest way to do it and this is not supposed to touch the other. I mean,
Yeah.
so, you know, changing that is way easier than changing velocities of one.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Luis. So now, we basically have this structure now, where there's an icicle that will drop on the player. We now have a trigger zone, and we have a manager that just holds all the objects into one object itself. Now, let's add some scripts. So I showed you earlier we have this script inside this assets scripts enemies folder called triggerfall.cs, and we basically want to attach it to our trigger zone because what the script does, in long and short of it, is it just looks at your child and just changes the body type to dynamic. So it's just gonna go inside the icicle and just make it so gravity applies to it. That's why we want to put in the triggers.
Changing your children's body.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go do that real quick. So inside enemies, we have this trigger false script right here. We want to put it inside here, the second part of the hierarchy of the ice manager. So just slap it on here. And then we also, as a little precaution for future reference, we're going to need to tag this as environment. I'll explain why later. But for now, we have the trigger zone here now. And yeah, now it has a script. So right now, this is basically everything you had before I gave you the little script. You could run into it and hang on. What happened here? This trigger. Did I forget something?
Wait, is there something wrong with that team?
Is it in the right script?
No, I think it's in that. Oh wait, no, I haven't heard it.
Oh, it was a player? Oh yeah, maybe we didn't tag it as player yet.
Very good friends with the team leader downfall.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Oh.
I guess the prefab doesn't have player tagged onto it, so let's just do that real quick. Because I assume they had the player tag right.
Was anybody in the tag workshop last 2 weeks ago? Do you, if anybody, do you know tags and layers?
Don't know what.
I mean, do you know tags and layers?
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining to us?
So tags are like categories that you can put an item into.
You recommended a game, dude. I still been your art.
Having like grounds, anything with the tag
3D,
grounds
it's
on
actually
it,
2D.
based on how you go as a player, obviously, but for the purposes of the workshop, anything with ground can be collided with and stood on, and
Diablo.
you can jump
Oh,
off it.
I know what you're talking about.
And then layers have to do with the way that images
So
are rendered
3D,
on the
2D,
screen,
but 2D art.
right?
Yes, it looks 3D, but it's actually
Do layers
2D.
have anything else to do?
Yeah, you are
That sounds
kind of.
fun.
It depends on which layers we're talking about. Sorry, I wasn't clear.
it's one
There's
very
two types of
specific, very
layers.
clever
There's
thing.
those layers,
That makes a whole
and there's
Oh.
sprite layers.
And the
Those
game-
are completely different. The one that you describe right now is the. Oop,
Requesting that
sorry.
art?
it's okay. The one that you describe right now. Can you go to the icicles?
Yeah.
The one you describe right now is the sprite type layer. It works very much how art does, right? The one
Sounds fun.
here, it refers to if
Wait, how much did you like raise?
these components are able to physically interact with one another, right? So layers, we can divide a scene into different layers of interaction, if that makes sense, right? So like I was talking before, my example was if you have NPCs and you have enemies, right? They both have colliders, but you don't want both of them to be able to interact with one another, but you want them to have colliders so that they can react to the player, right? So then in that scenario, you will probably have a layer NPC and have a layer enemy and not let them be able to physically interact with one another. So they won't respond to on triggers, on collide, nothing like that. They will ignore that. So that's what these layers help for. So what we did in here is that when we do ground, we're specifying that if the player interacts with a ground layer, then that's ground. Right.
Yeah. And tags are just like, these are both, the simplest way I could look at this is just tags and layers are just ways we could classify objects as well. So here we classify player as player. So if we want to ever do anything to a player specifically, we tag it as a player. So if, yeah.
Is there a major difference between tags and layers?
Yes. So tag, right? Imagine if you have, let's say we have enemies, right?
Yeah.
And you want them, or
Wait, I think I'm seeing it now. So like, if something's on a different layer, they won't interact with each other at all. But if they're on the same layer with different tags, they will interact with each other. But specific interactions will be different depending on their
yeah,
tag.
it's more specific. It's more like individual, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Layers, I mean, layers on a macro level could just be like how you want to display certain things. Like maybe you want to put a background layer and then a level layer and a player layer.
That's for render layers.
That's what he was saying. He's saying there's multiple kinds of layers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And then tags we can just use just for specific things. Just recapping for the people watching at home, of course, because I don't know if they can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Well, because
But yeah, so that's what
initially
was wrong
we
with our
did
script is we needed to add the player tag because that's what our script wanted.
And I realized
Is it's gonna
when I read
check
them
to see if it's a
over,
player
I
object,
can
and if it
realize
does,
and see why my
then we
teammates would
change
confuse
is
me.
kinematic to
Doing a
false,
GDD kind of in a
which would
professional
turn it to
way,
dynamic.
sort of. sort of a professional.
So
way.
now-
It's gonna be more detailed.
This is technically everything you could have done before the workshop.
Yeah. And I'm just learning after Brian somewhat scolded me.
Doesn't look that great,
no,
right?
No, that
It looked great to me.
Michael
All right, in that case, we're done. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Shit.
But
because I'm new to game
so
design. I mean, I have
before this
experience
workshop,
in
I
game
actually
design,
sent a CS
but
file.
Game design is
I
new
put
to me,
it
so there are a lot of
in
things
here.
I
Yes, the player
account
hitbox.
for that I have to remake my game design document.
I made this real quick, and it just basically we'll need to tag the
The
icicle
fact
as
that there's
a
no beginning
trigger.
or end, so I need to make
as
it,
well,
'cause I'm
to make
doing
sure
a
this
wave-
works.
I told you I'm doing a
And
wave
I
design,
tagged it as
so,
environment because I felt that was fitting for the
I have
object.
to make kind of like,
And
what's the
simply,
end game, what's the
I'll-
player trying to get
What a
to.
scene manager
Because
is
before
it just
it
like
was just
allows you to
infinitely
control
run
what
through
scenes you
waves,
want to show and what
and
scenes
if
you
you
want to
die, it's game
reload.
over, restart.
Is what the
Which
simplest
I don't-
way of looking at this script. So I imported scene manager and
yeah, but I mean, I
use
feel
the
like
load
there's
scene method
sometimes
to
a
just
better
like
way
reload
that I
the
can
scene.
approach this without.
So if the
doing
player
it.
gets hit by the object, the scene
Or
goes
survives
back to the
infinitely
beginning.
dies, restarts.
Yes.
So you got public string scene name.
Yes. Oh
What-
yes.
What a part of that is telling that scene
you wanna
name
hear what I
is
have in
the
mind
scene
for
that you're
you?
currently in.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Good
so
catch
my
on
game,
that.
of
I
course,
should
is
also
like I
mention.
told you way before.
So I
what I'm
commented
gonna
here
change
that
is
the reason
the
why
entire map is
is
dark.
because in the
There's an
workshop
aura of
I
lights
had you
around
create a
the player.
scene,
Yeah.
and you could name that scene whatever you want.
Came from all four
That's
sides.
why I made this
And
something you could see in the
like,
inspector
the player-
because you might have
the player
named the
can
scene
see
something
the
I
light will
didn't.
show where the
I
enemies
named it
are.
icicle, so
the
I would
player
have to
has
type in
point in that
icicle in the
direction.
inspector.
However, to
But
know
maybe
where the
you
enemies
named
are,
it
how
like
close they are,
level.
will be an alert indicator
So you would have to
on
type
one side
level,
of the
not
screen
icicle.
that
So it's just a way of making
red
the
will
script
just
more
like make
usable,
red and
and you
show
could
where
use
the
this script in
enemies are.
any level you make. So if you had like 3 levels, level 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
and you had icicles in all 3 of them,
Wait,
you obviously
UI
can't
like
don't want to
that.
reload the player back to level 1 if they're in level 3, unless that's part of your game design. But
Oh, UI.
if
right.
you want to load a specific
Oh,
level,
okay, fine.
I gave that option to you inside this inspector variable.
Well, how would I describe
So,
it? 'Cause I can't.
let me attach this real quick just to show you.
Damn, man, why is this so hard?
So, icicles,
Yes.
and, oh no, this goes in the player. So in the player object, I'm going to attach another script,
Yes.
and now you can
Because
see
really
in the
what the
inspector,
game is-
we have a variable called
Is that the
scene,
player,
and
so
I named the
changed
scene
it from having
icicle, so I'm going to name it
like
icicle.
close range
Whoops.
combat to going
Like
with
that.
ranged, but the limitation.
And like I said, if you named your level something else, make sure you put whatever you see up
you
here
can't see the
inside
enemies
here.
until they do
And what it does is it will load
It's
a
top down,
that level.
and you get a glimpse of the map. You can't
Now,
see where the
I
enemies
also
are.
should check, yeah, we need to make this a
The only
trigger.
thing I can see
So the
is
icicle
anything around
will
the player's
call that method if it
I
hits the
guess,
player.
sight. So it's like a circle.
So now,
I mean, I'm not sure how to
If I
describe
get hit
it,
by
but
it,
it's kind of.
the scene reloads.
What is the player's objective?
Now, fair warning,
Well,
this
they
is
wanna
like
test
just
whatever
something
they
simple if you
events,
want to make a
so-
level that resets. If you use
So that's-
checkpoints or anything that's
Well, it's like
not,
basically
if this isn't
so
part of your
basically
game
that's the
design, you may
goal.
want to make your own script. But for the sake of this workshop and just as an
The player can
option,
do,
you
so
have
they can
this
shoot
script
the
right here
weapon.
if you want to make a
Yes.
game where you just restart at the
How do
beginning.
they hit their weapon?
They just.
Good
they
thing
just
now
click
is
on a
that
button. They just click, I guess
now we
you
have an
say
ice
just click
manager
a button on
object.
the
We can make
mouse,
this a
so they can aim
prefab.
with
You
the
can
mouse.
reuse this as many times as
They
you
can aim with the
want.
mouse.
You could also just copy paste it,
Imagine if they can aim.
Right, they can aim.
paste, and now we have a second object that we can just like put right here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And now I just like do that.
Well, actually, yes, there is. They can't fire. They
And that's a
can't.
simple icicle.
Is there ammo? No. The ammo's infinite.
Oh, I'm
They
a little
can't
behind on these
fire
slides, but yeah.
infinitely. I mean, they can't. They can't
So as I
fire
mentioned,
like nonstop.
We
There's
put
a-
the
there's a
string
interval.
because it's an inspector variable, and now we have a functional icicle. Any general questions about the entire workshop?
I'm confused. Did
They
you
can hold
build
down the fire
the,
button.
the scene that you just created into the build settings? Because
No, I
I
didn't.
you did it? That's interesting. I thought that you had to have it in your build settings.
I
for it
think
to
that's
work.
when you're accessing a different.
Another scene?
Yeah. I remember I did that for a game jam project. You have to put stuff in the build settings.
So I missed one thing on the
So
tile
when-
map. How
when,
did you
when
change
that
it where
happens,
it like
the enemy
actually
take damage, but
fit
they would die,
together?
So.
Oh, so like the cell
Because I have
size?
to
Yeah.
use-
Oh,
so
okay.
they have
And like
health
where
as
would
the
you
player.
change that?
Yeah, my bad if I went over that a little too quickly, but basically, I had to change the cell sizes.
Yeah, because
And grid?
as the UI
Okay.
perspective, there's the
Yeah.
help bar.
You will do it in gray to change all of them, yeah.
So
I think you can do it in.
that goes empty.
Yeah, click on the tile map.
Oh, tile map?
Yeah. You can do it to can you do it to individual ones? No, you can't.
No,
it has to
the
be
option's
there.
not here.
Yeah, it has to.
You also need to be careful. You want to put your like colliders and rigid bodies in the tile map as well. I tried putting in the grid, doesn't work. So just make sure that happens as well. One more thing I want to add is if you, like as Luis mentioned, if you did want to load a different scene, you would have to put it in the build settings. I can do a quick example of that if you guys want. So let's just load up the sample scene, I guess. So I'll go into build settings and
I guess they just.
I would add that scene here. What is this? Oh, sample scene. Oh, perfect. So we'll have sample scene and icicle here. So there'll be 0.
Okay, so
and now that they're both in the build settings,
figured out, and that's my issue. So I'm trying to.
I will go inside the icicle manager again, find where the script was. Oh, that's in player. And I'll type sample scene.
So
like, what does the player do? What is the player trying to do? How does the player do it?
Oh,
you're in play mode.
Play mode. Oops. Oh well, it's fine.
Technical details of it.
I don't think I changed that much.
You don't need to say what the numbers
Sample
are.
scene.
Yeah, sample scene. Sample scene.
You don't need to say what the values
So,
are, but you need to say
do you remember if I have to actually build the game or
how would I
just do
explain
it?
it to them?
You can just do it.
Okay.
I just worry about
You don't
something
say-
else,
But yeah, so let's see if it worked.
Shoot 10 pixels away. You do need to say enemies.
So if I get hit by the icicle,
right?
put me here.
Yay.
Now I'm in a completely different game. Because that's how scene managers work. But yeah, so you have to go into build settings if you want to load a completely different scene. You could also use the scene manager if you want as a way to like go to a next level. So if you somehow made an environment object like your goal, you could do that. But yeah, it's also just the idea of the scene manager will help you guys if you want to make a game something like this. Again, checkpoints and all that, that's completely different. But if you just want to restart a level, this is the simplest way to go about it, is just using a script like this.
In terms of writing a GDD.
Any questions, scene manager, GDD, or anything in this workshop?
Huh?
How much
Well,
time do we
but
have?
also the
We
GDD.
have 30 minutes.
Any questions about any scaffold or unity thing concept? We can also help with that.
Right. So what do you recommend then?
So, on the scaffold, I tried to create like a pad that would launch me backwards slightly when I stepped on it.
Are there ranges?
And so I gave it like a force,
What happens when the health
backwards
bar gets
force.
to 0?
Very little to
So
do
a
with
lot,
currently
pretty
done.
much every single
Gave me like a
specific
backwards force
detail
when I landed it.
possible.
But it seems like your
That makes sense.
movement script
So then what
automatically would
basically
overwrite my backwards script.
That was a problem.
It sounds like a dumb question, I know.
So, to repeat the question just in case the stream didn't hear it, there's a problem when it comes to, there's this jump pad.
More of like a push you back pad, backward force.
Okay, so there's a conflict between force because the player controller, right, has the resin force being put into it as you're moving horizontally, right?
Yeah.
While yours is also doing the same way. Is he also adding force, or?
It's, yeah, adding force in the negative.
Okay.
The mayor has, or enemy has health.
What you will have to do
Enemy has.
is probably have some sort of
How health is displayed
state.
in the user interface.
So there's multiple ways to do this. One way you could do it is just adding force to attack, right? If you want to add a specific force that it doesn't matter which frame it is, you can just add the force to like push the character, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If you're actually trying to use velocity, you can use translate too, because translate overpowers velocity. You can be going at 1,000 miles per hour, but if you do translate, it's like a hand grabs you and it moves you so quickly.
But the player character.
You could do that.
Wait, so you would do track?
But if you want to do velocity, it gets a little more complicated because then we're talking about states for the player, right? And this is where being organized we call commentate. Like we have the character controller, right? It usually has all the states of your agent, right? So we have, for example, the jumping or the running. We can have one that says is on jump pad or is on interacting with this X object. When you have that, you can turn that flag on, right? And then steal the velocity. So you can say that you can read player's movement input when that's false. But when it's true, when we know that we're in an object, you can reset the velocity. And then you can add a new one. You can translate, you can force, you can do
I guess you would. I guess would you say when I design this, it's best to keep asking myself questions
Question, man.
and then build it up.
Thank you. Okay.
Is that, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it should.
While at the same time focus on having,
Stuff to think
just
about.
making sure
Okay.
like,
Any other
it's within
questions?
scope, it's beginning and end.
How would you design it if you did have a checkpoint? What would you use
No.
instead of settings?
Nice. Okay. So I actually just built that for the game I'm working on.
It's because I
And,
want
it
to
gets
clear
way more complicated because if we think about it, right? If you have, for example, a Mario game and you have checkpoints, right? If let's say you have checkpoint A and checkpoint B, right?
This is what I
Checkpoint-
want the
Between
players to be
checkpoint
able
A
to
and B,
do.
there's enemies
This is
around
what
it,
the
right?
players are going to
If
do.
you don't get all the way to
And this is
checkpoint
why
B,
the
if
players
you
are fighting
die,
against, if there
and
is
you
something
restart the
to
game,
fight against.
or
And
that
if
level
there isn't,
checkpoint,
what
right?
is
All the
there?
enemies before that checkpoint are supposed to be there again, right? So
So
that's something we can do if we reload the scene, right? That's fine, working perfectly, we're good for it. However,
Okay.
if you kill
That makes
some
a lot
of them,
sense. Alright.
but you leave some alive, and you
Yeah,
hit
sorry
the
for-
checkpoint,
for,
and then you die again,
I guess like
when the
if I
checkpoint
lied,
reloads, the ones that you kill should stay dead. But if we reload the scene, they are not gonna revive because they're reloading the scene, right?
Right.
So then,
I just feel like
when you are doing, when you're handling checkpoint
this stuff,
systems,
so
you actually do not have to
at least
reload
to
the
a certain
scene.
degree that I
You
can
shouldn't reload the scene.
carry it
What you
out,
should
carry it
do
out.
is that you should enter some sort of state that reflects that. So like what I did, for example, is I made the screen go black, and I actually grab the player and teleport him. Teleport that translate position or control position, and put him where I want it to be, which is
Alright,
the
yeah, check,
checkpoint.
'cause
And
someone
you
told me there was
before
one
you
today like
reset,
that,
right?
I don't think
So
so.
I don't reset the scene, I move in there. And then I look at his stats and reset his HP, taking a goal and stuff like that,
Actually,
right?
game dev.
For the enemies, you shouldn't destroy them. Because if you destroy an object, that means that we have no way to get this data, right? If we want to revive them, we
Asset
need that way.
creation.
So we need to have
Is that
enemies
it?
in some sort of like dead state and revive
There's
them.
a- there's asset
So
creation.
when you kill an enemy, you shouldn't destroy them.
That's
Maybe
it?
what I do is that you can deactivate the object. So it's deactivated, it's invisible, it's not there.
Is that an actual keyword like deactivate, or do you just hide the
Like the
colliders
put
and sprites?
dot set active false.
Yeah.
That's exactly what. So that deactivates it, right? And then if you reach the checkpoint, I have some sort of condition that says, okay, you stay dead forever.
So if set active was false, then delete.
It stay, not delete, just have it forever. Right? But if you didn't reach the checkpoint, I'm like, okay, did you reach the checkpoint? No. All the people who are deactivated, activate again. Revive. And
What, I mean, sorry,
I
yes.
feel like, cause I got into Unity
Sorry,
like
it's
freshman
like-
year, so I
it's
don't
like it's like triple
remember a lot of this, but
automatic.
I feel like I remember it's like really hard to
I'm gonna teach you how to
get
get those
objects if you deactivated them, like it's hard to find them.
Fair enough.
So do you have to just like have them stored in
Hey,
some
I
sort
need
of
an asset too.
array of objects?
yes, so each checkpoint is an object that stores all my objects that are enemies before.
Yeah.
I did it that way because my
It's a 7
my
and 9,
gameplay, my level design,
So it probably won't
it
be 9.
you can go
You just
everywhere.
need
I
that
go
time,
up,
times.
down, left, right, so I don't have a guarantee that there's a specific
All right,
order.
thanks, Ryan.
So if you have an order that you can guarantee that every object that is behind you is gonna revive, that will be easier to do because you can say you can check the position of everyone and be like revive you're behind on the left. But if it's something that you have, it can be anywhere in the level, right? Because you might do that, that's something very common. Then I have an actual list of game objects and I put them one by one. And then I say if you didn't reach, look through them and activate them, revive them. Does that answer the question?
So you can save like an array of enemies that you can revive if they didn't reach the checkpoint, or delete all of them if they didn't reach the
If it's a
checkpoint.
permanent, yeah, you can
Yeah.
handle permanent that way, yeah. Any other comments? I think we should be good.
Alright, workshop's over.
Thanks for coming.
Or not over yet.
Are there any other workshops today?
There's Art Strike.
Art Strike, and there is IGD.
What's IGD?